I was in a coma for 15 days. I woke up, asked the doctor, what do I have to do to get out of here? He said, well, you're going to have to rehab. And 12 days I walked. And I remember going to the doctor and saying, I walked the whole floor now. I want to get out of here. No, coach, you're not ready to go. I called Artie Wilson and I said, come down here. I can't be here anymore. And so he took me home. And that's not smart, but that's how my mind works and who I am. That mental toughness, and I got to stay focused and get out. My coaches have done a great job. I surrounded myself with good people that believe like I believe, and that trickles down to the players. We ended up having the biggest turnaround in the history of the game, the first play of the game. I looked down the sideline, every kid had his head on down, and they were absolutely still. And it was almost like they couldn't win. I remember just walking in the room saying, guys, here's the deal. What you say and what you do has to be the same. We said we were going to practice this way, and we're going to execute and do these things in the game, and you're not doing them. When you finally figure out that this is what we are and what we're going to do, we'll win. We walked out, the guys all of a sudden just started doing it correctly, and we won the game.
Congratulations to June Jones and his Hawaii Rainbows. 2 seconds, 1. That is it, zeros on the clock. Hawaii, a winner here at home.
There was guys on their knees weeping because they'd been in Hawaii and never won a game. Team has to be the reason for success. If it's me before we, you'll never be as good as you can be. And that principle we have been able to instill in our teams. That's why we've done some pretty unbelievable things. And I tell young people this, the greatest thing about this country is that you can do anything. But you better be something you have a passion for. Just never give up, and no matter how difficult it may be, you just gotta fight through and it gets better. You gotta trust and you gotta understand that there is light at the end of the tunnel, but you gotta just keep being focused and press on.
Greater Good Radio. Connect, learn, heal, and grow. This Greater Good archive video is brought to you by Brain Gain Hawaii, a boutique executive recruiting, career development, and coaching firm. Learn more at braingainhi.com.
Welcome to our show, Coach Jones.
All right, good to be here.
So, as head coach at the University of Hawaii, tell us about being a coach that ordinary people wouldn't know.
I would say that probably ordinary people don't know the hours that we involve during the season, for example. I could tell you for probably 12 years when I was in the National Football League, I would go to work at sometimes 5:30 or 6 and not get home till maybe 3 the next morning. So, you know, you had like 2 or 3 hours of sleep, and I did that for almost 10 or 12 years. It still affects me now, even when I came to Hawaii, and I work long hours during the season, but not that crazy. And I still, to this day, can only sleep about 4 hours a day because my body, I think, just got used to operating on 4 hours of sleep.
Is that because you love it, or is that because that's just the demands that it takes?
Both. I worked with Jerry Glanville at the Houston Oilers and in Atlanta, and we had a great time coaching, and it was fun to be at work. At the same time, it was because you had to do what you had to do to win, and that's obviously what it took at that time.
So what is the ordinary schedule or life of a coach? I mean, geez, you're going in at 6 and you're coming home at 3 a.m. I thought you meant 3 in the afternoon. I'm like, whoa.
My normal day, like we're in spring ball right now, or during the season, I usually get into the office about sometimes 4:30 or 5 in the morning, and then I'm usually home by maybe 9:30 or so at night during the season. Sometimes I go home earlier. If the team we're playing I know extremely better, I might be home by 7 or so, or 7:30, but it's long days still.
What are you doing in those time periods?
Well, you're watching tape, you're game planning, studying your opponent, trying to find out what they're doing in specific situations, and anticipating, you know, what they may do against you. And you kind of work all week to get to that Saturday night and hope you guessed right.
So do you take the mindset of you're looking at the opponent's tape and trying to react to that, or are you taking the mindset of we just need to be the best that we can be? And
that's a good question, both. But really, I've found the most important thing is being more concerned on what you're doing, executing, and perfection in what you do. And that has worked and made us one of the top teams in the country for the time that I've been here.
When you initially came to the University of Hawaii, the team had 0 wins the previous season, and you were an NFL coach. Why would you want to come here and coach?
Well, Hawaii, I always tell all my players that come from the mainland, and I tell anybody that comes here, once you're here and you're spending any time, you may leave, but you always come back. And Hawaii is a very special place, mainly because of the people and the Aloha spirit and the ohana that we feel everywhere we go, whether it's in the locker room or recruiting or whatever, out in and talking to people. It's just a real special place, and I always wanted to come back and coach at Hawaii, and I knew that one opportunity came my way in 1995. I got a call to know if I was interested in the job when Fred Van Oppen got the job, and we were making a playoff run for the Falcons at that time, and it was early December, and I couldn't do that to my kids and my team, in Atlanta, to get that stirred up with controversy and because we wanted to win the last 3 games to get in the playoffs, and we did make the playoffs, but I had to say no at that time, so I kind of knew that, well, maybe that was my chance, and I missed it, and then when an opportunity came again in 1998, I was head coach of the San Diego Chargers. They asked me to replace Kevin Gilbride during the season, and we had 12 games left, I think, and I told Bobby Beathard, I said, I'll take the job and finish for you, but I just want one thing. If the Hawaii job opens, I want the right and the permissions to speak with them about the job. And sure enough, it happened. And it's a whole nother story in itself, just that fact, but it happened, and I'm glad that I made that decision.
What's the pitch, though? I mean, they come to you and say, look, coach, we have a team. We won no games. Come and coach with us. How do you look at something like that?
Well, I look at it as an opportunity. Every place I've been in the National Football League, they were dead last when we went there. And I had great confidence that we could turn it around. It wasn't because of any other reason. I mean, not that many things have actually changed since 1998. I mean, I still have basically the same budget. Basically, everything's the same from back, when I first came here 9 years ago. But I had confidence in my ability to move the football, and I knew that eventually we would attract the local kids to stay home, and we'd attract more Polynesian kids to want to come back and connect with their culture and create a TV interest because of the way we play football, and obviously that's happened.
And so what step do you take from there? I mean, you knew the team you were coming into was losing, but you wanted to turn it around. Where do you start? Do you start with strength? Do you start with stamina? Do you start with attitude?
Well, you start with all those things, but the number one most important thing is attitude and being mentally positive and believe that you can do what you're going to do. I remember the first time that I went into that room to speak to the team when I got the job, and there was a lot of excitement, obviously. The NFL head coach had come, we're excited. They had lost, I think at that time, 18 straight games, not just 0-12. They had lost the 6 prior to the end of the season before. So I remember standing in front of him and talking to him and just telling him that with these same people in the room, we're going to be the number 1 offense in the country next year. And at that time, we were 118 out of 118. So we're only number 2 pass offense the next year, and I think we were 10th overall. But it's a belief of doing it, and my coaches have done a great job. I surrounded myself with good people that believe like I believe, and that trickles down to the players.
It almost reminds me of like Bad News Bears or something, right? It's like you can't get worse, but it's got to win something sometime, right? But how do you sell that to this team that they weren't demoralized?
Well, obviously, there's a lot of things that we do. They got demoralized the first game. After I had that speech and we sold out the stadium to play USC, we got beat, I think, 68-3 or something. And I really, to this day, think that we won the team over by the meeting the next day when we met with them. Because here they had believed and they're trying to, turn around, and then they just get their rear ends kicked like that. And, and I still remember showing the film to them, going over it play by play, and then showing them at practice. We had done it correctly in practice, but yet here's the game and we don't do it right. And you've done it 1,000 times this way. And just convincing them that it was nothing else but that we didn't do what we said we were going to do. And sure enough, once we got that first win, it just started to snowball, and then we ended up having the biggest turnaround in the history of the game, and nobody's ever, and I doubt that it'll ever be broken. I mean, to turn an 0-18 program to win 9 games in a bowl against Oregon State was an exciting year, one that we'll always remember.
It's not just the players, but what kind of things do you tell the coaches so that they're following you also?
Well, I do some things different. First of all, in hiring the 9 guys that are around me, I just really have one thing, that they're all good people. And I don't care what they know football-wise. I mean, I care. I say I don't care. But, I mean, they obviously have some football background or they wouldn't be here. But they're all class character people. And, we don't yell, we don't curse our players. We pat them on the back and positive reinforcement. And there's times when you got to get on a guy, or certain guys need a different tone of voice. Some guys don't. But you have to be able to manage that to get them to play at the highest level. And once you get that done, and once you have the right people in place, my 9 coaches have done a fabulous job. And in fact, Greg McMacken, we just hired this week, is going to be the defensive coordinator, who was the defensive coordinator on that 99 football team.
So when you're recruiting players and coaches, how do you know that they're good people?
Well, I spend, time with them when on the recruiting weekend, and I rely a lot on our players. Our players host the recruits when they come in. They spend 48 hours with them, and they know who's a good guy and who's not a good guy. And I ask them, I said, what do you think of so-and-so? And, oh, he's the best, he's a great kid. And then I'll sit down with him. And, you got to take some chances. I've taken some chances and won some of them, and took some chances on some other kids that haven't panned out. But really, to be quite honest, 3 of my best players were in jail when we recruited them. And they have been our best players, and they are the best kids that we've had. I mean, Pisa Tanoi Samoa, I really took a chance because of his mother. His mother was just the greatest lady I'd ever met, and I knew that there's no way that this kid doesn't have that, because I knew what his mom stood for. She's a very strong Christian lady, and I knew he had that in him to be a good kid. And sure enough, that's what happened. And then Colt Brennan, I think, had some trouble, obviously, at Colorado. Nobody, believed, but I spent time with them, and I made all the phone calls to all his coaches, everybody, and they all said he's the greatest kid you'll ever be around. And guess what? He is one of the best I've ever had, pro or college, as far as quarterback physically and knowing how to handle everything else, the media, the team, the leadership, everything. And then Devon Best, we actually saw him in a prison football game, and we recruited him, and he made freshman All-American, and he is one of the sweetest spirited kids I've ever been around. And you take a chance, you roll dice on some of those guys, and sure enough, they've panned out and they've worked good. And I've noticed they're very appreciative of the second chance that we've given them.
What's the reason that makes you motivated as a coach to give these guys a second chance? Because some people might just say it's just really going to bring a negative message to the team, and
Well, I think you have to have success with those kids. I remember bringing Pisa Tanoi Samoa. I had to go to the president of the school because he was in prison when we signed him, and there's a certain trust that he had in me, that I was going to do what I said I'm going to do with the guy. And I'm not going to take a chance on a kid if I don't think he can turn it around. A lot of kids, right away that they're not going to turn it around. Well, then you're going to have a problem. You're going to have a problem. And, I've stood by a lot of those kind of kids, and it's worked for me. And if they weren't in that trouble, we wouldn't get them. They go to UCLA, they go to USC, they go to Notre Dame. None of those kids would have gotten here. Pisa Tanoi Samoa was the only player in Southern California ever to be named offensive and defensive player in his high school year. No player has ever done that in California. And nobody would touch him after he got in his gang trouble. And, after investigating, Dennis McKnight went up to his parole, his court hearing, and pleaded with the judge to, release him to us, and it worked.
What are you telling these kids, though? Because, we're parents. We want to make sure that we're raising our children the right way. They do fall down. We want to pick them back up. What are you telling them so that and they know, it's like a secret message, this is what I expect of you? And
well, it's just that. They know what's expected. And it's like when I took over the football team that day I gave that speech, I told the team exactly what was going to be expected of them, that they had to be on time, that if you miss class or if you miss this, you're going to be allowed a break, and we have a 3-strike rule. But if I decide after that, then you're done. You're not on the team anymore. And so sure enough, after that meeting, I laid out, don't be late for a meeting, don't be late for practice. I want to know if there's a problem, you call me. Here's my cell number. I don't want to find out through somebody else where you are. You tell me why you're not at practice, and then I'll decide if it's a valid reason or not. And that's what we do. So sure enough, the leading rusher on that team was a kid named Charles Tharp. And I think on an 0-12 team, he had rushed for over 1,000 yards. He was the top offensive player. And the other kid who turned out to be one of the great kids that I love, and Rinda Brooks, who started a business here washing windows and has really done very well. He was the leading tackler and had ability to play in the National Football League. Well, the first 2 or 3 meetings they were late to, so I cut them, and they're no longer on the team. Now that made a statement to the other 105 guys that what you say and what you do has to be the same. And if it isn't the same, then you cannot lead. You're compromised yourself. So here I just cut the 2 best players on an 0-12 football team, and we still won. Team has to be the reason for success. If it's not a prerequisite for that, if it's me before we, you'll never be as good as you can be. And that principle we have been able to instill in our teams. And that's why we've done some pretty unbelievable things.
If you had to run a company, how would you instill that in your management team and your company?
Exactly the same way. There's things that are expected of you. I always, do a lot of corporate speaking because it is very connected. The same things that are successful in football or basketball or baseball, it's not rocket science. It's the same keys that make you a successful corporation. I'll give you a good example right now. I walk into Aaron's restaurant or Lulu's, okay, 2 people that I know that manage those. Now, a lot of people don't know this, but I watch these people, and this is a service industry, which is very difficult right now to find quality people to work in a restaurant, okay? Well, I went into Aaron's one night, and I was in there early before they opened, and everybody, the cooks, Al Souza Jr., everybody was holding hands together and saying a prayer before they opened the doors. Now that togetherness makes them, to me, one of the finest restaurants in Hawaii. Lulu's has that same ability. It's almost like family. In fact, most of the successful restaurants in this town, sometimes we're the mom and pop places that you go to, different places. Well, guess what? It is. It's family working and doing some of the parts that make a restaurant successful. And I just use those as an example. They have managed to put that it's we before me, attitude into their job. And if you can do that, and you can do it, you're going to be the best you can be.
You're not a subscriber at all of superstars then? It's more of a cohesive team.
Well, superstars are a byproduct of a successful team. We have a superstar in Colt Brennan. We have a superstar in Devon Best. But they have learned to give the credit to their teammates. If you listen to Colt Brennan talk on TV, the first thing you can say, he said, my offensive line did a great job for me today, da-da-da. That is instilled to him over 3 or 4 years of being in our program. He understands now, why we're winning. That if he doesn't have those linemen, if he doesn't have Devon making a great catch, or Ryan or Jason Rivers having the game he had against Arizona State in the bowl, guess what? He can be as good as he wants to be. We're not going to be a good team. And, it's kind of amazing. I tell people this, and there's 22 players, 11 on offense, 11 on defense, and you have 2 kickers. Well, off of that 0-18 team, we had 22 of the same 24 people. A lot of people think all of a sudden you brought in a whole new group of people. No, it was the same people. That to me was more amazing than anything about that year.
So what's the major milestones in that turnaround then that you saw?
We had gotten beat by USC, and I had gone in and we'd practiced and we hugged them and loved them and pat them on the back, and we're going out next Saturday night, we're going to play again. The first play of the game, we're playing Eastern Illinois, and they do a flea flicker. They hand it off the tailback, he pitches it back to quarterback, and he throws it for an 80-yard touchdown, first play of the game. And I looked down the sideline, every kid had his head on down, and they were absolutely still. And it was almost like they couldn't win. So we go in at halftime, I think we were down like 27-7 or something, at that time. I don't really recall, but we were behind 2 or 3 touchdowns. And I remember just walking in the room saying, guys, here's the deal. We're not going to change anything what we're doing. I said, you guys are not doing what we said. What you say and what you do has to be the same. We said we were going to practice this way, and we're going to execute and do these things in the game, and you're not doing them. I said, look, I'm not going to yell at you. I'm not going to scream at you. I said, it's not going to change. It's not going to change next week. It's not going to change 9 years from now. It's the same formula. And I said, when you finally figure out that this is what we are and what we're going to do, we'll win. And that's all I said. We walked out. The guys all of a sudden just started doing it correctly, and we won the game. And you could see there was guys on their knees crying, weeping, because they had never won a game. They'd been in Hawaii and never won a game. They had lost 19 in a row at that point. And then from that day forward, they started to believe and say, you know what, Coach is right. If we just do this, we can't be stopped. They can't beat us. We just beat ourselves. And that belief is why I've had success at every level that I have, because I really do believe in the things that I've come up with from an offensive scheme standpoint. And I am able, and Dan Morrison and Ron Lee and Dennis McKnight, who's played for me in the pros and coached for me here a couple times, they believe that way too. And so it doesn't matter who we're playing or where we go play. The kids believe they have a chance to win. And that's the biggest difference.
You're no stranger to football because you were the Kodak All-American star quarterback, right?
Yeah.
You now then transition to coaching. How was that transition for you? Did you just model your style after the coaches you had that made you so great as well?
I've done a lot of things. While I was playing in the professional football, after that year that you're talking about, I owned my own business. I sold satellite televisions, dishes to private homes. I put in probably the first dishes in a private home in Atlanta, Georgia, and I invested all the money I had. I was only making $25,000 a year playing quarterback for the Atlanta Falcons at that time. And I saved up enough to buy and put down payment on 10 satellite dishes. And I didn't know the first thing about satellite television, but I had watched this show in 1977 called ESPN. And I had seen it because Ted Turner was big in Atlanta. He had just started Channel 17, which now is CNN and everybody else, WTBS. And I remember watching in his studio this 24-hour sports show. And I was a sports junkie anyway when I was a kid. So I'm watching this. I'm watching Chris Berman. And then they'd go off the air, and I'm watching them in between commercials because the cameras were still running. And I said, this is going to be big. And so, believe it or not, I went and found out that homes out in the country couldn't have cable. And so I said, this is going to be so big. So I went and bought 10 dishes. I didn't know how to put them in. I didn't know anything about them. I think I bought them, the whole package, for like $2,100, and I sold them from anywhere from $12,000 to $20,000. And those 10 units, I made more money than I made playing football. And so sure enough, somebody else was doing that too, and then it got real competitive. And so I was in it for about a year and a half, 2 years, and it got real competitive. All of a sudden the prices dropped way down because, $2,100, a little markup there. But, you're going to do what they're going to pay, And so by that time, the markup went so down that you'd buy it for $2,100 and you'd only sell it for, $2,800. And I didn't know, it took me forever to put the things in anyway. So I just decided that I needed to do something else. So I was in securities. I was a principal in a securities company. My father had an investment firm, and I sold stocks and bonds and different things for about 6 or 7 years. But that sports, I was just a sports junkie, like I said, and I wanted to coach. So I coached in high school for 2 years in Georgia. And then I called Dick Tomey. Jerry Glanville, you asked me about the two coaches. The two coaches that influenced me the most are Jerry Glanville and Mouse Davis, who were on my staff the last 2 years. And I hired them, and they now were working for me. And I think most of the things that I do as a football coach, I kind of stole from them, and they influenced me greatly.
What gave you the confidence to make the leap from doing what you were doing in business and then going back into football?
And I tell young people this, the greatest thing about this country is that you can do anything. I mean, you can be whatever you want to be, but you better be something you have a passion for, okay? And like I said, from the time I was 5 years old, I wanted to be a professional athlete. I was going to do it in something. I didn't know what it was. I shot even par golf when I was 12 years old. I was all-state in football, basketball, and baseball. And I chose football after realizing that I couldn't run, and I wasn't a power hitter in baseball. So I wasn't fast enough to play basketball in the pro. So I decided I got to play football. And I was 6'4.5". I was 180 pounds, and I couldn't run, so I couldn't be a wide receiver. So I taught myself how to be a quarterback. And I remember taking a bag of footballs and throwing them up against the wall over and over. I painted a circle on a wall. And I remember going up to my grade school, and for hour after hour, I'd throw the ball up against that wall and hit that dots that I put up there. And I remember my fingers started to bleed, a couple times because I did it so many times. But I was going to learn how to play quarterback, and I was like 15 years old at this time. And sure enough, I finally got a chance to play my senior year in high school. And the University of Hawaii and Oregon offered me scholarships in Portland State. I ended up going to Oregon at the time, where I backed up Dan Fouts and a guy named Norval Turner, who just took the San Diego Chargers job. We were the quarterbacks. And then I transferred to Hawaii. And at that time, they were passing the football. And when I got here, they became an option team. Larry Price became the coach, and they wanted more of a running quarterback. And I couldn't run. So I was here 2.5 years, never really played. But I continue just to work hard, try to get myself ready all the time in case I did get a chance. But I transferred back home, and I really was going to quit football. But a guy named Mouse Davis, who we talked about, talked me into coming out one more time. And that year, I set the NCAA record for passing in one season. And, I think back about that, how close I was to quitting and giving up. But I have always had a passion to do that since I was young. And finally I got a chance because of all the hard work and not giving up. I am sitting here talking to you today because I decided to continue to play football. And it would have been real easy to quit. I mean, I played 5 years and never got in a game,
Do you remember what that conversation was like with you and the coach? I know you had the passion, but he's giving you the second chance, but also him telling you, just believe in yourself, you're going to do it this time.
He didn't really say that so much. He called me for 3 months, and I kept telling him, no, I don't want to. But he remembered me in high school, and he remembered me, and Mouse had just taken the job at Portland State. And so he knew that I could throw the ball, and, and he believed that I could do what he wanted me to do. I just didn't want to go through it all again, learning, meeting new names and being a leader and all that real quick in 2 months. There's a lot more that goes into being that guy. And, I'd done it at 2 different colleges for 5 years. And obviously NFL's not looking for a guy with that much experience and never been in a game. And so finally I got to August, and again, football comes around. I said, okay, I'm going to go do it. And that's when I did it. And, it worked out, obviously.
How'd you get to the NFL then? At that point?
I was a free agent. Mel DeLora, who's my weight coach, and Mel transferred from Hawaii at that time too, and we signed free agent contracts with the Atlanta Falcons, and then I was lucky enough to make the team, and that was obviously an unbelievable dream come true. A kid that envisioned he'd play pro in something when he's 5 years old, to not get the knock on the door and send you home and you made the team. I mean, that was unbelievable.
What's the hardest part about that journey from when you first started football to getting in the pros? A key moment where maybe if you had gone kind of the I give up route, then wouldn't have gone.
That's definitely true. I do know this, that I really believe this, and I believe this is true about my experience here at Hawaii too, is that God has a reason why things work out the way they do. I mean, spiritually, for me, the experience of making it and meeting the people and being able to grow as a person in that setting was the reason that I was there. I mean, I wasn't the best quarterback. I mean, I wasn't the best player. I did start 4 or 5 games, my 5 years in the league. But God had me there for a reason. And as I look back on it, I see why I was there. Well, I wanted to come back to Hawaii in 1999. I had dreamed about it. I remember Steve Barkowski, my close friend, said on NFL Films show that they did that he remembered in 1977 when we were rookies together at Atlanta. He was a quarterback too. He asked me, what are you going to do? I said, I'm going to be the head coach of the University of Hawaii one day. I said that to him in 1977. I don't remember it, but I remember saying that after playing here, that I wanted to come back here and live. And so, that was also the reason that I came here. It was a real spiritual thing to me, too. I mean, I remember I really was trying to decide whether to stay in San Diego as the head coach or come here. And I prayed and prayed about it. I talked to God like I'm talking to you. And I asked him to please guide me and show me. Now, I'm going to get a little emotional. I remember saying that night, they had offered me a 3-year contract for a lot of money, millions of dollars, to stay as the Charger coach. And so I remember saying a prayer that night that I still don't feel good about staying here because I didn't like some of the things that were going on. So they had a quarterback they had drafted that I didn't really believe could play. And so I remember talking with Artie Wilson and talking with my agent, Lee Steinberg, and they said, well, June, why don't you, for a whole bunch more money and more years. And so I thought about it. I hung up the phone. I called Bobby Beathard and I said, Bobby, you know what? I want 5 years, and instead of 3.2, I need $2 more million. And let's make it about $7 million or whatever. It came to $7.5 million was what the deal over a 5-year contract. So Bobby said, I don't know that we can do that, but I'll get back to you. So that was about 1 in the morning when we were talking, and hung up the phone. I said a prayer. I said, well, if it comes back, you know, that they're going to give it to me, I guess that's the answer, that deal. So Bobby called back in about an hour. He said, done. And so I hung up the phone, and I still didn't really feel good about Hawaii. Jim Donovan, Hugh Yoshida, Ed Wong, who has passed away, but really is the reason I believe that I was here. I can remember I was supposed to meet with them at 9 o'clock the next morning, and I'd written a check to cover all their expenses for coming up, and I was going to tell them that I was not going to take the job, but I, you know, felt obligated, so I was going to make a donation to the program. And I walked in there, and Lee Steinberg, right before, he said, you know, June, I've heard you talk about Hawaii for 25 years. He says, I think you really need to go through that interview. And so we sat down, and with about 5 minutes into it, I'm speaking, and I can just tell that this is what I'm supposed to be doing, because I'm talking about Hawaii. And I know that this is what I was called to do. I mean, I knew it instantly. And I kept going. Edison Miyawaki was one of the group, and he didn't really understand how I could leave all this money at San Diego. And Ed Wong was sitting there about the third time after that question came up, because they didn't think I was sincere, I think, about it. And Ed Wong said one thing that to this day is the reason I'm here. He said, Edison, sometimes it's destiny. I just knew it. That was it. I said, that's what I've been trying to say. And to this day, when he said that, I knew that was my answer to prayer. I know that seems crazy, but that's what happened.
And so what was that, I guess, call back to the Chargers to say, well...
I did. I called Bobby right away. I said, Bobby, I apologize, but I'm going to take the Hawaii job. And at that time, I didn't even know what the pay was going to be. I think they paid me $199,000 the first year, and some boosters came in and stepped up and gave some more money. I don't know how I got off on that, but...
No, that's good. See, actually, on a side note, that's what I always thought. I said, you know, he's passed up millions of dollars to come here and gets paid a couple $100,000. What's the big deal? But
well, I knew that. I did know also that there was always something about Hawaii that has always made me feel like this is home. And as I look back over the 8 years that I've been here and starting my 9th, when I look at what's happened to so many of the kids that we've had, I know that's why I was called back. I mean, we have had so many amazing stories on kids. You know, we talked about Peace and Devon and Colt, and you hear about those, but there's 105 guys on the team, and it may be a guy that never gets in the game, that we have the chance to change who he is and to get him directed into a positive way and be a good person in the community. And really, that's what it's all about. It's not about the wins and losses. It's about those kids.
what's the most inspirational thing you've seen from that kind of experience with those kids?
Well, one of the most inspirational things to me, I've saved, and I have in box, letters from parents and letters from kids that may played for 4 or 5 years, thanking and saying things that we've been saying to them for 5 years, and now they are ready to go challenge and try to be successful in whatever they choose to be. They learn in our locker room, and I really do believe this. I believe in our locker room and on our football field that these kids learn more about how to be successful in life than they do on upper campus. I mean, don't get me wrong, you got to have your upper campus education, but the tools of life, the tools to be successful in business, the tools to be successful in whatever you do, you learn over the 4 or 5 years you play on our team. And to me, that's more important than any of the things. Now, we won 11 games last year, and sure, that's why, it's fun and, it brings it all together. But it's those letters that I have in my box from the kids. We have a kid right now that's been around here. He's a quadriplegic named Brian with cerebral palsy in a wheelchair and can't really speak, but is limited, obviously, in what he can do. He's been with us probably 9 years, 8 years maybe, almost every practice. He comes, meetings. I just made him a graduate assistant this year. And knowing what the commitment that his parents make for him, he lives on the other side of the island, to get him to practice every morning at 7 a.m. and be with us. Really, you asked me what are the one thing, that probably more than anything, watching him become part of us. You know, he even went on a senior walk, I think 3 years ago, that we do at the last. We gave him a jersey and a letter and everything.
You talk about these tools that they're learning in the locker room. What are the key tools that you're teaching them to be successful?
Well, I really believe there's only 3 things. In life, if you read and if you really study history, you can see how to be successful. What I'm going to share with you is not magical from me. Even all my offensive things that I do offensively, that I have credit for being, you know, the top offense in the country, I've taken from Ted Marchibroda, Miles Davis, Bill Walsh. I mean, I put my touch on them, but they're not my ideas. You know, I've fine-tuned them. Same thing is true with what I'm going to share with you right now. I really believe this, and Colin Powell said these 2 things. For a person to have no limits, to do anything, and to have no limits on what you can do, you only have to have opportunity and proper training. That's it. You just have to have the chance, and then you have to be prepared through proper training to do it. I really believe this, that you have to have a third thing. You have to be smart enough and educated enough to know when to take calculated risk. If you have the courage to do something nobody else will do, and you know that it'll work, and you pull the trigger and do it, then you have a chance to be great. And if you really go through life, if you go through any successful, I guarantee you they're going to have those 3 things, that somebody rolled the dice when nobody else would and took a chance. I tell stories, and I usually, a lot of them are military stories, but I tell our team usually every Friday night before a Saturday game, I'll tell them a story somewhere in history. Sometimes it's a war story, sometimes it's 2,000 years ago story. And I use this as example quite often. And Aristotle says this about excellence. He says, we must manage our behavior to meet the objective. Excellence is not an act, it's a habit. So what does that say? It says the same thing, that proper training, doing the same things over and over again, and doing them faster and quicker than your opponent, allows you to be the best football player you can be. I mean, we played Fresno State, I think it was 2001, and we've had some unbelievable games with Fresno State. The stadium was packed, and we're down by 3 points with about 3.5 minutes to go. And we get the ball on our own, like, 2-yard line, and Nick Rolovich gets sacked, and I mean, he gets killed. And I walk out, and the doctor says he's done. It's over, he's done. His shoulder popped out. And so Timmy Chang was on medical redshirt at that time, and I told the team that I'm not going to save Timmy Chang eligibility because I got all you guys here. If Nick can't play, Timmy's going to play. I said, even if it only means 1 game, it's going to cost him a year. That's the way it goes. I said, our job here is to win as many games as we can for the seniors. And so I had to go out on the field and ask, Rolo, are you okay? I said, can you go? And the doctor popped his shoulder back in, and he was hurting, and he looked at me and he said, Coach, it's my left arm, I'm okay. And so he came off the sideline, went back in 1 play, I put another kid in. We got the ball at midfield, and Nate Jackson sacked David Carr, and we got the ball now with about a minute to go with a chance to tie the game, take it to overtime. So Nick completed a couple passes. We're down on about the 17-yard line, and we called my last timeout. There's 17 seconds left. So it's 3rd down, and I tell Rolo, I said, okay, Rolo, here's what we're going to do. This is what I want you to do. And I was specific on telling him something that we've done a bunch of times. I said, we cannot complete this ball in play. It has to be a touchdown. It has to be our ball, or it's over, because we can kick the field and go to overtime. So Rolo says, I got it, Coach, I got it. So we go in, and sure enough, he does exactly what I said. He looks to the left to get the free safety out of there. He goes back and throws the ball to Ashley Lee, exactly like we talked about. Ashley jumped up, caught it in his hands, turned, foot down, score, win the game. The crowd goes wild. I mean, nuts. Now, what people don't understand is that Nick Rolovich and Ashley Lee had thrown that pass thousands of times. He could do it blindfolded in his sleep. Excellence is not an act, it becomes a habit. And you have to be able to do those things under pressure. You don't have time to think when it's 3rd and 17, last play of the game. It has to become a reaction. And the only way you can do that is by proper training and doing the same things over and over and over again. There's no way you can mess it up. Tiger Woods won a golf tournament. I laughed one day. I'm watching Colonial, and he's up by 4 shots, and he's on the 16th hole. And they call the tournament, it's dark. And they tell Tiger, you can play it tomorrow, finish the last 2 holes. You know, the first prize is $1 million or whatever. He says, no, I'm going to finish. He finished in the dark playing golf. Now, everybody thinks that was a great act. Well, it is a great act to be able to do that. But what people don't understand, if you go to the driving range tonight in Augusta, Georgia, it'll be dark and Tiger Woods is still on the range hitting balls. Excellence is not an act, it's a habit. Proper training. He is talented, he's a very gifted player, but he works harder than everybody else, and that's why he wins.
What's your favorite military story to share?
A couple I've told many times is a story about a mafia guy, and his name was Fast Eddie, and he was Al Capone's accountant. He was Al Capone's right-hand guy. And before 1920, in the late teens, right into the 20s, Al Capone was running everything. He had his hands in multi-millions of dollars. And Fast Eddie was a guy that had a son. And as his son got older to 7, 8, 9 years, is this the life that he wanted to lead, have his son go into? And so he decided that he wanted out of the mafia. Now, he lived in downtown Chicago. Whole block was this guy's house. I mean, the whole block, he had everything, had it all. And so what happened was he got out, and you know there's no way out. And sure enough, he went state's evidence against Al Capone and put him in prison for tax evasion. And it was the accountant's testimony that put him in jail. And that's where Al Capone died. And sure enough, within 2 months after the trial and everything, this Fast Eddie was gunned down in an alley in Chicago. Well, in 1943, we were getting our rear ends kicked in World War II. I mean, we were looking for some way to turn the tide. The momentum was not going our way. And you talk to any military person, there was an event that happened that we decided in 1943 to go actually to attack Japan. And there was aircraft carriers, secret, and we had to go get it done a certain way. And we had to take off from different ways to do it. Well, all the planes took off this aircraft carrier, and the last plane to take off was a guy named Butch O'Hare. And Butch O'Hare took off, and just out of the glance of his eye, he saw a whole Japanese group of airplanes coming toward the aircraft carrier where they just left. Now, very vulnerable when everybody leaves, obviously, the aircraft carrier, and there's still 2,200, 2,500 men probably on the ship. Well, he totally turned his plane around, went head into all these Japanese planes, shot everything he had, and then was trying to hit the planes and do everything to disrupt. And it allowed just enough time for them to radio and to warn everybody. And he basically saved all the men on his aircraft carrier and crash landed on the plane. Now, how do these two stories come about? Well, Butch O'Hare was Fast Eddie's son. O'Hare International Airport is named after Butch O'Hare. Now, what I tell my team that story? I tell my team that story for this reason, that you can be going down the wrong road. There's a lot of things that kids are faced with now. You can make bad decisions, you get involved in different things, but you can change. And not only can you change your life, you can change your children's life if you're willing to take that step. And Butch O'Hare was given the medal, obviously the highest awards for that act. But that single event, I think, really hits home about the character of the man and the character of winners. And if you can instill that in the kids, in my players, which we try to do many, many ways, like I said, that goes a lot further than anything else. That probably, I think, was one I've told 2 or 3 times.
You know, as a coach, when you win, everyone loves you. When you're losing, they're talking about you. How do you handle these outside pressures, just keeping on track of what you value, or what you know is best for the team? Can you share that with us?
Different people handle it different ways, but like I said, I believe God has brought me here for a reason. So my faith is not in the talk shows. My faith is not in the people or what they're saying. My faith is in God. And when you trust that you're here for a higher reason than just the game, you're here to change lives. You're here to be involved in my coaches, changing who they are, changing who the players are, by just how they look at me, how I handle it. Wow, what is that about him? Well, I don't know how people do it if they don't have faith in God. I really don't. You might ask some other people, I don't know. Look at President Bush right now. Everything is against what we're doing, He trusts God. That's how he survives.
There was a situation where you were coach, and then you suspended one of the players. Something had happened, and then actually it ended up with a not so good season. This was when you were in the mainland. So how did you handle that situation? I know you said it's faith, but I'm sure people were still going, oh, you see, the superstar's not there. That's why you guys lost.
The player you're talking about is a quarterback named Jeff George. And we had gone to the playoffs in 1995, and I had made a deal with Jeff George. I knew that he had some difficulties prior to him coming to play for me. But I told him this when I signed him. I said, Jeff, here's the deal. You have 3 years left on a contract. I said, if you come to Atlanta, I'm going to make you the highest paid player in the game. I said, you're going to be my quarterback. If Atlanta won't pay you what you think you deserve, somebody else will. You just become a free agent and you'll have to leave Atlanta. But I said, you have to trust me on this now. I will make you the highest paid player in the National Football League. Well, sure enough, that first season he was, I forget, he's like Colt numbers, completed 60-something% of his passes. He had 38 touchdowns, 10 picks or whatever. And it was Pro Bowl kind of numbers. And so he wanted to hold out the next year out of training camp. And I kept calling him. I said, Jeff, we had a deal here. I said, I told you at the end of 2 years, I'm going to make you the highest paid player in the league. You can't hold out. I said, what we say and what we do has the same deal. And, well, they're not treating me right. And so I said, Jeff, I kept going through. And I said, you have to understand something now. This is a team game. It's not a you game. I said, you're having the success you're having because you're on this team. And I said, if you violate and you don't play good enough, I'm going to put in the other guy. I said, I'm telling you that. But yet, if you hold out and you come back and you don't play like you did, the team is going to want Bobby Hebert in the game. And I said, as a coach, I'm going to lose the team if I don't do that. So I said, I'm just being honest with you. I'm telling you. So if you hold out, that's going to happen. So he came back. First game he played unbelievable, really good. But the next game we lost. And he had a situation in the game where he did kind of cost us the game. And so now, it's right there, third game of the season. And so sure enough, I said, if you're going to have to do it now. I said, just get in there, let her loose, do like I know you can do. But if you're not getting it done, I'm going to put Bobby in. So there's no surprises. I want you to be honest with you, tell you what's going on. Well, sure enough, he was struggling and he didn't do what he was supposed to do. So I put Bobby in. Well, he lost it. He started saying all kinds of things. You've seen it a million times on TV. And so I knew that he was done. He totally compromised himself with me and with his teammates. And so when I went in the meeting the next morning on Monday after the Sunday game, and I walked in and the team was, you could hear a pin drop again. I said, here's the deal. Jeff George is done here. We will win or lose with Bobby Hebert. And the team stood up and gave me a standing ovation. And so from that point on, we didn't win many games. We were in every game. We lost, I think, 11 games down that stretch in the final 2 minutes of the game. But Bobby was at the end of his career and just wasn't quite the passer that we needed in what we were doing. But to this day, I have no regrets about that at all. And I really do think that there was a reason why that happened, because there were some things in my personal life that I needed to get straightened up. And it allowed me, when I got fired, the first time I'd ever been fired, allowed me to evaluate, what I needed to get in line. And when that happened, it brought me here.
You're the coach. You're always doing the motivational talks to your players. When you get down in times where you're feeling really down, who gives you the motivational talk?
I pray. I mean, I'll close my eyes and tell God what I want and what I need. And you know, the great thing about that, God really says this in Philippians. He says, have no anxiety about anything, but in everything, through prayer and supplication, let your requests be made known unto God. And the peace which surpasses all human understanding will keep your hearts and mind in Christ. Now, I really tell God what I want to do. People ask me all the time, do you pray to win the game? I say, yeah, I pray to win the game. God doesn't promise me that we're going to win that game, but it takes away my anxiety about coming to the game and going to play the game, and I'm at peace while I'm there. And if you're at peace, you really don't care if you win or not. Now, you prepare yourself, you do your job, but that's how I handle pressure, that's how I handle anxiety, that's how I am the way I am. People say all the time, how do you stay so calm? You know, well, that's how. God has already written the newspaper the next day. I mean, I believe that. God knows what happened yesterday. He knows what's going to happen tomorrow. So he already knows the outcome of that game that we're playing in. So I don't worry about it. My job is to be ready to handle it, win or lose, the right way. That gives me peace.
How about another story in terms of how you've seen this faith come into your life, where it's taken you through a trying time, or maybe you failed at something and then it took you through?
It's kind of funny. I've had probably 2 or 3 periods in my life where, as a believer, as a Christian, I let my personal life get out of whack. And then things happen where God gets your attention. And, you know, I never used to curse at all. I never cursed at all. Swore. And all of a sudden I found myself swearing and doing different things about 4 or 5 years ago. And then I took a real look at what was going on. And in fact, I remember standing up in front of the team 2 years ago saying, you know, I'm not going to ever curse again. And telling them, because they had seen me never curse before. And all of a sudden I go 2 or 3 years and, you know, I can't control. It gets back to what I said, what you say and what you do has to be the same. And what I was saying wasn't what I was doing. So it's out of whack. And those things happen to you. I mean, I got in an automobile accident here, and I got in that for a reason. And God saved me for a reason. And I didn't know why I lived through that. It's only divine intervention that I'm alive. Okay, my aorta was torn for 3/4 of the way. Okay, if your aorta is torn, you usually have 12 to 15 minutes of life. Okay, and even if you survive the 12 or 15 minutes, which many people don't, obviously, you're paralyzed from the waist down in 90% of the cases. Okay, now, when I went to the hospital that day, I have a scar from here to here. They fixed everything, cut everything. I had broken all the ribs, broken everything, had a gash in my head, everything. So when they wheeled me out of 3 hours of surgery, fixing all that stuff, my blood pressure is still not right. I have a scar on my back the same way because they flipped me over. They found the torn aorta 4.5 hours later. Now, medically, there's no explanation why I'm alive. What that accident showed me is that it wasn't my time, and God had something that he was going to do in my life. And I'm finding out, to be quite honest, a year went by, I still, you know, I'm sore and all that kind of stuff all the time. But I really do believe that past season that we had was one of the reasons that he kept me alive, because I saw the change in so many of my players. Colt, Devon, I see so many changes that had I passed away that day, those kids wouldn't be who they are today. And that's why I'm starting to see that there was more work that he wanted me to do here.
I know that it seems like you have a lot of faith and you've had a faithful life your whole life, but did that experience change? You know, when people say, I dreamt of this, or I remember the light, or something happening to you?
None of those things happened to me. I was in a coma for, I think, 15 days. The accident was February 22nd, I believe, and I woke up like March 5th. And the first thing, I had to get out of the hospital. I wanted to get out, and they said, oh, you're going to be in the hospital for maybe until midsummer, you know. And I said, I can't be in this hospital. And I think it's from my days of playing football. If you're ever hurt, you lose your job, you know. You don't. And so all the years of conditioning, I got to get out of here. And the thing, I had to get out of the hospital. I wanted to get out, and they said, oh, you're going to be in the hospital for, you know, maybe until midsummer, you know. And I said, I can't be in this hospital. I think it's from my days of playing football. If you're ever hurt, you lose your job. And so all the years of conditioning, I got to get out of here. And I'm not proud of this, but I'll share it with you. And Dr. Itagaki and a couple of other, Michael Dang, the reason I'm alive is Michael Dang was probably one of the best heart surgeons in the world. Just happened to be on call that day at Queens Hospital. And, I woke up on like March 5th, and I asked the doctor, what do I have to do to get out of here? I had things in here, I had things up my nose, I had IVs going everywhere. And he said, well, it's going to be a long time. You're going to have to rehab. You got all this stuff. I said, well, tell me what. He says, you're going to have to be able to walk around the whole hospital, and you're going to have to be able to rehab your legs. My legs wouldn't work when I got up. They didn't know that I wasn't going to be paralyzed. And so I took one step, and I couldn't go anymore. I couldn't take a step out of the bed. And every day woke up, and I said, I got to take another step, another step. And in 15 days, not even 15 days, 12 days, I walked all the way around the upper floor at the Queens Hospital. And I remember going to the doctor and saying, I walked the whole floor now. I want to get out of here. No, coach, you're not ready to go, not ready to go. So at about 1:30 in the middle of March, I called Artie Wilson. And I said, Artie, come down here. I can't be here anymore. And so he came in the hospital about 2 a.m. and I pulled everything out, and he took me home, and I've never been back. And I've never been back for a checkup. I've never been back for anything. And that's not smart, but that's how my mind works and how I am, who I am. That mental toughness and things, and I gotta stay focused and get out. And I'll never be 100% still. My legs don't work quite right, and I'm sore as heck, but I'm lucky to be alive, and there's no reason why I'm sitting here talking to you. I mean, there really isn't.
Why are you so hard-headed? Did your parents raise you?
I always have been very determined person. I'm mild-mannered, calm, but when I focused on something, the only way to do it is you just got to keep doing it. It didn't matter what it was, hitting a baseball or throwing footballs up against a wall. I mean, I remember going to Mel Delore and I worked Island Movers, and we'd go to work at 6 a.m. and we wouldn't get home sometimes until 10:30 at night, and we'd go straight to Clum Gym and lift weights and throw football. I'd throw footballs in the Clum Gym for an hour. 2 in the morning, then go to work the next morning. And I did that for 2 years and never got in a game. But I knew what it took, that if I ever did get a chance, I was going to be ready for it. And that mindset was what you do sometimes as an athlete, I guess. And, it wasn't smart. It wasn't probably the right thing to do. But I'm telling you, that's how my mind worked. I had to get out of there to be able to recover.
And then how did that change your perspective on life after the near-death accident?
There wasn't the light like you're talking about. It was just that I was just determined to do everything that I had done before the accident. I mean, I remember I ride a motorcycle, I ride a Harley, and every Sunday I would ride, after a win, I'd ride around the island. And so I remember, okay, that's about the only thing I haven't done. I played golf in late March that same time. I mean, 2 weeks after, I took one club and I played golf, but I mean, my mindset was I have to get back to normal, and golf was one of those things. And I remember I played with Elroy Chong, and I couldn't even bend over to put the ball in the thing, and we played, and I actually broke 80. And I couldn't bend over, and I couldn't do anything. I still had steel stitches in here. And for the next 2 years, I never broke 80. But I did it 10 days after I walked out of the hospital. And I went 2 years with all my clubs. I only used probably 3 clubs that day. And I never broke 80 again for 2 years. But I mentally, just the focus and fight through the pain, and you got to do it. And that's what I did. And I was telling you a story about getting on a Harley. I rode around the island probably mid-April, which is maybe now 30 days after the hospital. And I remember I couldn't get my leg up over, but I got on the bike, and I dislocated this elbow, and I was riding, and you ride like this, and when I got off, I literally could not move anything. They picked me up off the bike, but I made it all the way around the island. So now that was the last thing that I did, that I said, okay, I've done everything now, now I'm well. And that was my mindset. It's kind of crazy, but that's how I do it.
Going into the office at 4:30, coming home at 9:30 at night, when do you have the time, and why do you do it?
Because I'm hard-headed, like you said. No, I don't know. I love what I do, and I love the kids. And, I realized that I've made some mistakes in my personal life because of that commitment to do it. You know, my whole life, the team, the other coaches, the players have all been my family, you know, so it didn't matter what I was doing. I mean, that's the things I remember, and I tell my players all the time. Like the Arizona State game, you know, we beat Arizona State last year. I mean, I've already forgotten most of the game. I mean, I remember a couple plays, but I'll never forget watching Devon and Ikaika and Leonard Peters. I mean, I'll remember those people, you know, and that's why you do what you do. And those kids become, you know, like family for you. And even though I feel, like I said, I made some errors in my personal life and still do, I'm just like everybody else. You try to, you know, live right and try to be right, but you're going to make mistakes. And I have had some sacrifices in that area that you wish you wouldn't have to go through, but, you know, you pray about them and correct the things wrong and move on, you know.
Where does this bracelet come in?
This bracelet is part of my foundation, Eo Natoa, Eo Natoa E. About 7 years ago, Michael Post, who wrote L.A. Law, Hill Street Blues, Magnum P.I., all the music, he's probably the #1 music guy. He's become a good friend of mine. In fact, I was with dinner with him last night. And he had told me back in 2000 he wanted to do something for the school. He's been living in Hawaii for about 40 years. He spends 2 or 3 months here, and this is like his second home. And he says, I want to do something for the school, you know, for you. I want to do something for you. I said, well, that'd be great, Mike, you know, da-da-da-da. So a year goes by. He says, I'm still working on that. I got it. I got an idea, da-da-da. So one day about 2001 or 2002, he called me. He says, what are you doing? I said, nothing. He said, I'll be by to pick you up at 8 o'clock. I said, what are you doing? He said, I'm not going to tell you. I'll tell you when you go. So he picks me up. We go out to Pearl City. He's rented a studio. And he has hired some of the top Polynesian, Hawaiian instrumentalists in Hawaii, and they're all in the studio. And he says, I want to show you what I've done. So he wrote the music, the jingles that we play at the games for kickoff, for defensive stand, different things that you hear, he gave to the school. And for the last 3 or 4 years, we've been playing them at the stadium during the games. And the players really have identified with them. And it really has become a neat thing. After that night with the music, we needed some words. He says, we need some words. You know anybody some words? I said, well, there's a guy up on upper campus, a professor, a Hawaiian Studies program. His name's Kanalu Young. He's a big football fan. I said, let's call him. So we called him right there. And so I explained to Kanalu what we're doing and put him on the phone with Mike. And in about 10 minutes, Mike's eyes light up. He says, that's it, that's it. Tell him. And he gives me the phone, and Kanalu says, Eo Natoa E. He says, tell him what it means. He says, it means that we must respond with one heart. This is battle, you must respond. And I immediately knew that's what Mike was looking for. So those words became part of the music. And now we've created a clothing line for my foundation, a bunch of different things. The school, I had Mike reassign it to my foundation. And so warriorsrespond.com, if you go on there, we have all kinds of t-shirts, hats, all different. My players are involved in it too. And all the money goes to charity for the products. And so it's been kind of a fun deal.
Why is it important for you to give back to these organizations and community?
I really do believe this, that you're put in these positions of leadership for that reason, to give back. Not only to give back in love to the people around you, but you give back to the community. And I think everybody feels when they come to Hawaii, okay? It's different. They don't know what it is. They can't put their finger on it. But what it is that by nature, I think the Hawaiians and the Polynesians have that family that you feel in the locker room and in a successful organization. And so by nature, it's just here all the time. And that's when people come, they talk about the Aloha spirit, but what it is, that's something that's different about Hawaii. And it's the give back that everybody does. I mean, it's natural, you know, and it doesn't matter. You know, you go anywhere in Hawaii and sometimes you see a child in the neighborhood. You can go down neighborhoods in Waianae or Palolo Valley and there's a kid there, and the whole neighborhood, that's the neighborhood's child. I mean, you know, they're all looking after that kid. That's that give back. And I really do believe that in Hawaii, and not just in Hawaii, but on the mainland too, that's why so many people, when they get put in positions of leadership, it's your job. It's what you're supposed to do. And I really do believe that. That's what we're called to do.
Can you remember a time where you knew that giving back or nonprofit activity made a big impact?
Oh, yes, I can. I mean, our first event was a 5K run at Les Murakami Stadium, run and walk, and to see the look on the people at Hugs when we gave them the check, I mean, that was worth it all. And Hugs does just so many great things for families. In fact, it was one of the first places I was riding my motorcycle one day in Kaimaki, and I just happened to see somebody. I stopped and just walked into this house and where they do their work for kids that are terminally ill. And I just knew that what a great service they were doing for the families. Basically, that's so traumatic when a child goes through chemotherapy or major medical treatment like that, the impact it has on the family and the parents. And what their vision was to just be able to help the parents after 4 months of this treatment go out for dinner at night, and they would watch the kids. And they knew what to do because of all the things. I said, wow, I said, that really touched me. And so that first event, I saw the look in Donna's eyes. That was pretty powerful to me.
What's the most inspirational story you use when you got to get the team back up?
In the locker room and stuff, I'm not that way. I'm pretty specific, and this is what we got to do, and it's the same kind of stuff every week. So I mean, I don't tell those kind of inspirational type stories. I do tell them a lot of stories, and as I've shared a couple with you, but most of them are stories of team, of commitment, of excellence, by doing the same things over and over again. I remember we all knew this time. In fact, you're old enough, I'm sure, to know where you were when we walked on the moon. And I can remember when I was a kid, they were having a party at my mom's house, and they had all these TVs around because we had beat the Russians. Now it looked like we were going to walk on the moon. And here we are coming in, they're covering it, and the Apollo aircraft, the lunar module, leaves the craft, and now it comes down. Of course, the one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind is said. And man, for the first time in my life, the grown-ups were around cheering and clapping, and they felt like a team, like pride in the country, that we had done this. And that was the first time I'd ever experienced that. Now, my parents had gone through World War II, the Korean War, the victories, and there's a lot of pride and camaraderie in those events of pulling together as a nation to do them. But I had never experienced it because the Vietnam War was going on, and there was a lot of negative stuff in the media in our country, where everybody's bad-mouthing it and da-da-da-da-da. And so, as a young kid, 12, 13 years old, I'm not experiencing this great country we live in. But that event I remember. And what was interesting, I didn't know this for years later, but I'm going to use this as an example again, is that when he stepped on the moon, I was reading a book, I think it was Apollo 13, where I didn't know that the lunar module was told to return to the aircraft because there had been computer failure, and that they risked their lives, and that don't do it, get back, that something had happened. And Command Central in Houston had radioed them to tell them to do that. Well, they decided to go ahead and do it anyway, and the rest is history. But when I was reading in the book, I found out that those astronauts had done that thousands of times in the deserts of Arizona with computer failures, with power failures, with monsoon rains, with winds. They had done it thousands of times and could do it. And so the question was asked, well, what was that like to put that first step on the moon? The answer was, it was exactly like we did it in the drills. Excellence is not an act, it's a habit. Proper training. He had those things that I talked about. Opportunity, he had been properly trained, and what was the third one? He took a risk. And because of that, he'll probably go down as one of the greatest in the history of my lifetime for taking that step.
What was your childhood like with your parents? Was your father really into sports, which made you a sports fanatic?
My father was into sports and was an athlete. He was not a professional athlete, but played high school and college. He always came to my games, but was not, around a lot. When I was growing up, I just played in the streets all the time, played in the parks, and didn't matter if it was basketball, football, baseball. I caddied in golf, and that's how I learned how to play golf, and I loved every minute of it. But when I turned 13 years old, went to high school, there was not enough time for golf, so I gave it up for probably 15 years. And I wish I had continued it because at that time, some of the guys that I beat as juniors are tour players now, but I've beaten them when I was a young kid. But golf was not the game, and was kind of a nerd game at that time, I think. And now it's become the sport it is because of a few people.
What's been your favorite childhood memory?
My favorite childhood memory was winning a 6th grade basketball championship against a team that was so much better than us. And not very exciting, obviously, but that was the one thing I remember. And most all of them are sports related, Little League games, or that one was a grade school game. But we beat a team that was way better than we were. We just hung together and just beat them.
Do you write your goals down?
I do, and I take the season. I kind of we'll give our team maybe, obviously our goal is to get into a bowl game every year at the end of the year, which we actually, I think, have been in 5 of the 8. And we should have been 6 of the 8. In fact, my best team next to last year's team, my 2001 team, was the best team, but we didn't have a bowl to go to that year. They didn't have one in Hawaii. But I divide the season up into goals, like this is where we need to be after 3 games. This is what I think we should be, but we can be no worse than this after 3 if we want to get to here. And then once we get through those 3, no matter where we are, then take the next 4 or 5 games. And this is what we need to do now. And we take them one at a time, but we need to be no worse through this stretch of here. So I break this season into specific things. Really not individual goals, more all team goals.
Do you have that childhood essay that says, I want to be a professional athlete? Those doctors, They always say that and put it on their wall.
Well, I will say this. I'm sure I wrote one sometime, but I didn't keep it. But I know that I set a goal to be a professional athlete, and like I said, I thought it'd be hockey or golf. Actually, I played more hockey than I did anything, but I don't know. I just was committed, and I was just gonna find a way to make it, and I'm lucky enough that I did, and I played 5 years, and then I had to reassess your goals. And what are you gonna do now with the rest of your life? And that's what I did.
Did you go 5 years because 5 years you get pension?
No, actually, 4 games into your 3rd year, you get your pension, or into your 4th year, you get your pension, so.
Did you have a childhood business?
I just caddied, I was a caddy. The summertime I caddied Thursdays and Friday afternoon, Saturday and Sunday. And in those days I carried 2 big bags and you'd get some money. But the real reason I caddied was you got to play golf free on Monday because the course was closed because they're doing stuff so all the caddies could play. And that's kind of how I learned how to play.
Why did you eventually leave professional NFL football?
Well, I wasn't good enough as a player anymore, so they kind of run you out of there. And then I really wanted to come back to Hawaii. I mean, I could have stayed in San Diego, and had I stayed, things would have been great. But, I mean, professional football was 20 years playing and coaching of my life, and it was a great experience. I may go back there one day, I don't know, but I have nothing but good things to say about the National Football League. It's a 1 in a million. They've done a fantastic job with everything they do.
You mentioned in the locker room, that's where the guys learn the most about life and life lessons, and they take that out of there and with them throughout their life. What's the best example you've seen of a player take a life lesson out of the locker room and apply it in real life?
I think that anybody that comes through our program learns how to persist, learns how to fight through adversity. If you can't do that, if you're not tough enough mentally to go through when things aren't going your way, then you're never going to be successful. I said my 2001 team was my best team until the team last year. I really said this to the guys when we went 3-9, or I think it was in 2000. I knew that what we were going through that year was going to make us who we are the next year, because the kids never gave up. They never quit. We played as hard the first game as we did the last game. I remember in the 3-9 season, we're playing Washington State at home, and they're so much better than we are, and we almost beat them, because we didn't quit, because we didn't give up, and the kids just kept going. And so by instilling that in them in a losing season was the reason we went 10-3 or 10 and whatever the next year. I mean, that's what happened. And the same thing happened in 05. We were 5-7, and I could see cold coming on. And the kids just kept going, kept fighting, and kept going. And that's why we had an 11-3 year, because we went through those difficult times. We hung together. Nobody quit. Nobody pointed fingers. Everybody just stayed together. It's real easy in those type settings when things aren't going good to become divided and to point, well, it's not me, it's him, it's that guy over there. That's the natural thing to do. But if you hold it together and you pull those, they really take that from them. And that is the reason that they have success, whether they be a fireman, a lawyer, or doctor, because you're going to find those same things in those professions.
What is your greatest life accomplishment?
I don't know what that would be. Probably will look back. That same question asked to me in 20 years, I'll probably look back and say, you know, professionally, the record Timmy Chang set and the record Colt set will probably stand for a long, long time. The career passing yards, I don't think anybody will ever break that record. I think Timmy Chang will, 50 years it'll be, unless they change the rules of the game or something. And then the 58 touchdown passes that Colt threw last season, I don't think anybody will ever come close to that again. So those professionally, right now I'm not thinking about them, but 20 years I probably will say, look back and say, wow, that was really something. Personally, I'm really taking a lot of pride in the foundation thing right now. I mean, I really am moved by that. And a lot of people are helped with that, you know, and touching in the community, what Mike Post did, it really means a lot to me. And I'm really excited about the event we have coming August 20th. And it's going to be a fun deal, and that means a lot to me right now.
And what would you say has been your greatest life challenge so far, and how'd you overcome that, and what'd you learn from it?
I would say having the courage to make the changes that we made it when I came to the university, and having the courage to not get distracted with all the dissenters, to be where we are now. I mean, we are now have a chance because we took a lot of criticism and heat for a lot of the changes we made, from Hugh Yoshida, me, Jimmy Donovan, now Herman, now, you know, Carl Clapp, Tom Sadler, and the changes we made in a lot of the ticketing, the changes we made in the logo, the changes we made in who we are. I think those things that I've described to you, persistence and staying focused and being mentally tough when people say it's not good, well, it'll prove out that it was the best thing that the school ever did, because we already have just the logo sales of the H versus where we were before. We do twice as much in a month than we did the whole year of 1999. I mean, that's unbelievable. But branding and having the courage to do those things still takes courage, and still takes a lot to get it done. Hugh Yoshida had enough courage to do it. And obviously I was there with him. Lee Steinberg was part of that. Kurt Ozaki was part of that. And a lot of the key people in the department were all right there.
If there's one message that you would like to leave our viewers with, what message would that be?
I would say that probably to say never, never quit. Just never give up. And no matter how difficult it may be, you just got to fight through, and it gets better. And everybody goes through personal crisis, challenges. I've been through 3 or 4 really in my lifetime where you don't want to ever go there again. And it's hard, but you got to trust and you got to understand that there is light at the end of the tunnel, but you got to just keep being focused and press on. And like I said, everybody goes through those things, and with God's help, you can make it. And I'm proof of that. And I'm thankful that the good Lord didn't turn his back on me when I turned my back on him.
Would you consider yourself lucky?
I think you make your own luck. There's a saying in sports that it's better to be lucky than good. And there is a lot of luck sometimes in games or in events, but I do think that hard work and discipline, you get luckier. And you take those calculated risks. Seems like you got lucky, but you didn't. You knew. Now, nobody else said that was the thing to do, but you knew it was, and you had the courage to go do it. You got a chance to realize greatness.
How important is the quarterback's off-field conduct toward their teammates and so on, as opposed to their on-field conduct?
It's just as important, probably more important, because you have to create an atmosphere where, when we try to do it a bunch of different ways, but the guy next to you has to be willing to take a bullet for you. I mean, basically, that's what you got to create. And the reason you're doing that is because he'll do that for you. And being able to create that is done in the locker room. It's done at night when you're hanging out with the guys, and all the little things becomes and creates that camaraderie and the commitment to do those type things.
Right, and that's what I noticed when Colt Brennan goes on TV and says it's my line, buys him pizza. That's probably the smartest thing that he could possibly do.
Yeah, definitely makes them love him, and he does and says all the right things, there's no question.
What was one thing that you did as a quarterback to make your line loyal to you?
A tough guy, and I think respected me because I always tried to say the same things that Coach says. You take a bullet for your guys, and you don't ever point the finger. It was your fault, not their fault, and those type of things. And you create that atmosphere.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, June Jones, for joining us today.
If you resonate with Greater Good Radio, please join our community at www.greatergoodradio.com, where you can get access to exclusive content and offerings. Hope to see you soon.